Julie here with siriustalesmoon. This is Venus Hour, and we're talking about Saturn night. So this is a very busy episode. I'll try to talk about a couple of things. One is the difference between cult-like society or nation and sovereign society from the perspective of the moon, which is secure attachment versus trauma bond. So this is topic number one. Number two is what happens when we meet our child needs versus what happens when we don't, or a society that allows children to be children versus not, and how does that affect housing? And topic number three, and this is being in a juncture where three empires at least are vying for a crowd. I would get the algorithm of Chinese propaganda, US propaganda, Arab propaganda, or Muslim propaganda, and Soviet propaganda. And I'm going to address the positive things and the challenging things of each culture as I see from the propaganda. Also, in relation to the moon, with China, mothers decide or women decide, make the main accountants with Muslim. There is zero usury culture, so they do not accept the payments and installments, and they have the wits about which deal can hold in terms of real estate, which is a house, and which doesn't. And with the United States, we have the secure attachment. The secure attachment. Well, with the Soviet Union, we have zero PC, zero nonsense type of culture. And okay, in each and every culture, there are things missing from the other cultures. I don't know if I would get to Israeli culture because I would really need to meditate on how that correlates with the region that I am. But definitely, all of those things both correspond with and are missing in one another's cultures. So, topic number one, the difference between cult-like structure and sovereign community with sovereign individuals is secure attachment. What do I mean by secure attachment? In secure attachment, we get to be who we are. Okay? Always like let's bring in an edge. Let's bring in some sex. Okay? People, I don't know, somebody has lust for somebody. That somebody responds. They begin to interact, and then that somebody that had lust suddenly has a shift in his or her energy, and it's like, oh, they're the child now. The child. Yes, completely non-erotic. What happened? Nothing. Okay, that can happen. All of these things can happen in sex, can happen outside of sex. Person suddenly is not in sex situation. No problem. Nobody disappointed. Nobody thinks they're not attractive. Nobody thinks somebody owes them sex. Um, Weird, unusual. Shit happens. Okay. Nobody thinks to rape a child. Why? Because nobody traffics children and nobody traffics people. So people are not reliant on trauma bonds, and then they can be safe to be who they are with one another, knowing they will not be hurt, not their inner child, not their adult self. Okay? Naturally, in such society, people have homes because they can be themselves. Relation, moon, housing, secure attachment. They will not lose contact with one another. They'll just decide, okay, wait, I need to be a child. You need to be a child. I need to be safe and protected by basically motherly love or fatherly love right now. Oh, wait a second, you're not available to play that role now. Okay, I need to be elsewhere where someone is available to play that role now and willing to meet my need adaptively. Maybe they need to care for a child. Naturally, I don't even need to say that care and control mixing them is trauma bond, is cult-like relations. So it's not somebody that needs to care for someone because they haven't met their own inner child needs. Okay? That understanding is actually something that's coming more from the teachings of secure attachment that are coming from the United States. Attachment pattern. It's not about staying stuck in an attachment pattern. It's about meeting our needs. In fact, when I learned about talismans, one of the ladies that really wanted to get pregnant, she did talismans, and she did also a moon talisman as a part of a bigger creation. The moon talisman began to address meeting the emotional needs adaptively. At the time, just being exposed to that work, I was in a moon perfected year, and I learned about how important all teaching of Vlada Duncheva that the moon of the provider is coming towards, here is behind the moon of the more receptive. And we can't fake it. If the provider needs to be a child and needing to be in the receptive mode, they need to be around people that can provide for that. For me, for example, when I was young, I was tending to be the parentified child. Okay? And the parentified child will tend to attract people that need parenting. It's not unaware. And then as I began to meet my inner child, the people who are more providers, emotional caregivers, their moon began to meet my moon. And then I also met people that, just like me, it was a coping mechanism for them. And I had to discern and say, okay. And this is where secure attachment comes into the forefront. Because in trauma bond relations, in cult-like societies, the minute somebody gets to grow, somebody is about to have enough money to have a first installment on a house, amazing. They will be attacked from everywhere. Somebody begins to open a business, they're about to go to the next level. They finish the second certification, about to go into apprenticeship. Somebody just bought a house, increased the business, maybe thinking to get into a relationship. All of these junctures are ritual abuse, rape, torture, psychic attacks. That's not a society to live in. Unfortunately, this also is both in Israel, but is coming also from United States. This is how I know from American people that deal with that. BIPOC and not BIPOC, that deal with that and they say, yeah, they get it, the person, when they are beginning to level up. This is also how I know that there is a little bit of an American colonization here. Now, it sits on something very Israeli. And my other culture, Netherlands, okay? People cannot grow too much. They cannot be over the top. That sits on with the ritual that was done to me in Israel by Israelis. They try to keep people toned down. Doesn't work. It explodes. It goes boom. And indeed, houses exploded in the Netherlands. Why? Because Dutch people are about to level up. They say, okay, private sector or public sector, we need housing. It can be met in a private sector, but we need to run a business. Can't do with all this bureaucracy to run a business. And our business need to business. After the COVID boom, everybody became a business owner. Can't be with all the ritual abuse, all those things. It's not. So in sovereign, secure attachment society, we can be who we are. When we grow, okay, we can do the back and forth. Why in Israel many people, until they get acknowledged by the welfare, and usually they get acknowledged by the welfare because they become so sick that they are on the verge of suicide, or for many even after suicide attempt, and there is debt that was caused. Suicide, they don't care. People can jump from the rooftops. But if there was debt that was caused by this, because they lost meaning of and purpose of life so much so that, and usually what happens, I had a neighbor like that, because she already was older and has an apartment. She was prescribed SSRIs, antidepressants. Why? She worked for the Ministry of Health. That's depressive. They're so corrupt. And she says, "Doctor, I don't want to work anymore. It's depressing for me." Okay, she didn't come and made up a story. I said, okay, but he did prescribe pills against depression. Every single night, she. Going with the neighbors, IKEA. You know, when I go to IKEA, I buy maybe a candle, flowers for my mom, Salomon, thousands. Now she has a house, she's not in debt. What happens? It's a bubble that feeds a bubble. The SSRI create manic, which causes people to spend a lot of money. If she spends a lot of money in IKEA, a couple, a couple of old ladies or a couple of middle-aged ladies that are prescribed SSRIs can be a yearly revenue. Now, what happens when that bubble pops? Another lady wants to have grandchildren. Now there is lockdowns. IKEA is in trouble. I go to IKEA, everything is discount. And I said, but this company is already supposed to be affordable. Now, nobody has a house, nobody can pay the rent. What can we buy? I buy salmon. Because if I'm hungry and there is leftover food and I can eat there, so when I have money, I will buy salmon in IKEA, even if it's more expensive. It's not that much more expensive, but I'll buy the IKEA salmon. Because when I had no money, I could eat there. So if I get some money, then I'll buy my food there. And I wasn't wasting money because that food was about to go to waste. It wasn't about to go to be recycled or resold. But the fact that I could get the food there and I sit there, and basically it's good for the company because mostly what you see a person coming in, come out, hardly anybody sees them coming in and coming out. What people see is another person dining at the restaurant, especially when the business is weak. That's important because it shows that people are still dining at the restaurant. In Japan, they hire people to sit in a restaurant and give them a coffee and give them food just so that they will bring people. That one time the person goes to take and pick a plate, okay, only a stalker would notice that. The rest of the people are busy doing their thing. The person comes, sits with a plate, and eats. That's another client in the restaurant, visibly, that attracts people to come and buy in the restaurant. So I bring revenue, and when I have money, I also spend money to buy the food. Now, obviously, if I could buy a house, I'd probably buy some stuff from IKEA first. because that's the place. And even bigger decisions. Maybe the furniture I could buy, I don't know, from a big company, but there, when I had no money, I could eat the food and sit and eat. So when I have money, I spend it there. Okay? That's the difference between cult-like. Now, in a cult-like society, the minute I even think to gather enough money to buy a flat or to buy an apartment or to rejuvenate a place, oh my God, the entire world goes crazy. In a secure attachment society, it's not cult-like. That would be the time where the plumber and okay, all these people would say, okay, can this person pay me? If they can, amazing. Is a fully paid job. If they can, it's a fully subsidized job. Fully subsidized job, can I film the place? And then it's marketing. I help another person, and then it's marketing. Where do we buy? In the place where we could eat, or in the place where we didn't have money, we could basically have food or have with the resources or have internet or have a glass of water. Okay, without worrying about children being kidnapped, children being raped, employees being harassed, or now as we go from cult-like society to secure attachment society, things begin to bubble up. Okay, let's say, I don't know, um, next month I have a ton of things sitting in my room. Now, one good teaching that I got when I was in Netherlands, own a house, was to make of every space like it is my house. So amazing, I will invest some money. I have a nice place to put my things. If there is some scandal going in IKEA, for example, about employees or this or that, it will bubble up, it will surface up to be resolved. And then once it's resolved, we're leveling up to secure attachment society. Because for me, when I think if I ate in that place when I had no money and I was recording and I could charge my phone and there was a place that had heating in the winter and air conditioning in the summer, then when they're in problems, I think, okay, what can I contribute to change that? That's secure attachment-based society. And it affects business. Because if we're thinking, oh, it's business, it's this and the business line, the money line, that's called like society. Okay, we cannot have an economy without people. So the economy must support each and every individual person. Now that we went talking, and I hope that difference is clear, okay? Called like society, people can't grow, they keep feeding off of each other, then there's persecution, genocide, and so on. They can't be their child self because everything is built on a wounded child. A wounded child can get addicted to sex, not even knowing that what they try to meet through sex is being their own wounded child. That got eroticized because they never got to be safe as a child, so they try to be in power over their sexuality, consequently being repetitively addicted to sex. And usually who they are met with is a trafficked and tortured person, and they're basically now perpetrator towards a child, but they never got to be a child. Okay? In cult-like society, when one person reconnects with their inner child, everybody is complete and total shock and trying to harm that inner child because they never got to be children because it wasn't safe to be a child. And then they realized that all the harm that they were planning on this person and that they did this person, whether that person knows it or not, they were doing to a child. And that harm is rape. What is mind control? Okay? To mind control people need to get people into trauma and make them susceptible for direction. What happens to a person that gets into trauma? They regress into the what? The child state. So who are they directing? A child. Benefically? No. If it was benefically, they never would need to begin with to bring a person by torture to a child state. Does it contribute to national and international security? False flags, yes. It's great for economic hitmanship. Secure attachment are many things that are not at all possible to begin with. People are way less susceptible to mind control because they can be who they are and be honored. If it's zero rape society, because there is secure attachment, and because secure attachment has a place, so it's a zero rape society. Person understands what are their relational needs at a certain setting. Are these relational needs met adaptively? If not, look for a setting where they're met adaptively. Okay, for example, secure attachment thinking. I had a horrible experience with a cult-like real estate society. I said, what is the matter? They were cult-like. Still, the needs, emotional needs of people need to be met. Person built a house for his family by raping children, by this, by that. Emotionally attached to the estate that he built for his family and lived with his family. Made that into 4 units that they sold it to a lawyer, I don't know what, and managed it as a realtor. Somebody gets in a tenant. They're supposed to traffic that tenant. The tenant, of course, doesn't want to be trafficked. Now, the energy of the realtor that built the house is not wanted in his own house. This is soul breakage. Did he brought it upon himself? Probably he was regressed continuously to a wounded child state that never got to heal. What was the tenant trying to do? Reconnect with their own child self before they can be in a relationship. Now everybody's wounded. Person tries to heal away from all the trafficking world and gets that in their own place where they're rented as a tenant. That wealth consolidation is on the real estate. Now, what? Okay, if that was not trafficking, what needed to be happening? Okay, the realtor got a crush on their tenant. The tenant is not into the realtor. The tenant is going into healing their own inner child. Children don't have sex. Then that tenant is tortured. What needed to happen? That tenant to begin with needed their own house, their own estate. So they don't run into the lineage problems of whoever lived there or whoever built that place. This is why, for example, in India, they have particular times where they begin to build an estate. The times of the year was preferable, times of the year not preferable. There's a festive. They begin with particular direction, and they go by, I think it's Vastu. People are expert at connecting those things so that they build foundation. There are other things that are challenging in India. Okay, there's the caste system, there's the fact that the children are parentified. In a secure attachment society, a person grows to a certain age, even as teenager. There are places in rural Uganda, okay, where child becomes 12, they have their own dwelling. Doesn't have to be a mansion, okay? Built, same, from the sand, ecosystemic building, little bit of cow dung, because there it's not stinky. So the first cultural shock about Uganda, rural Uganda, is the use of cow dung, um, both as antiseptic for the winnower and as insect repellent for the floors. So simple ecosystemic building, not elaborate, but the child gets, as they become teenager, get their own place that they build together with the people in the village. When that child begins to masturbate, the parent doesn't need to hear it, and it needs to be safe to do so. That's what that's what happens to people when they're teenagers. And also they learn how to be independent, how to care for their own dwelling, not elaborate dwelling, simple dwelling. In the United States, a person is almost kicked out of the house. They can face homelessness. They can face drug trafficking, human organ trade, sex trafficking. Right? They need to be independent. They need to be responsible to pay the rent, work, and are the jobs. People work at I don't know, 7-Eleven. Okay, work at 7-Eleven. Work seven times at 7-Elevens, and it wouldn't have rent. Wasn't how it was for the boomers, but we can't talk about the boomers. And they live where? In an apartment. At 20? At 18? What do they do when they masturbate? All the neighbors here? Let's not talk about Germany. A person steers the tea. And I don't mean in any analogy or steer the literal teacup, steering the teacup, police. You say, oh, they don't have to make a sound. No, they're steering the teacup police. Even if they breathe heavily. Secure attachment is not afraid to talk about it. It's obvious that once that becomes a teenager, it needs its own dwelling in a place where everybody knows that this 12 years old thing can masturbate and have an orgasm without the parents. Without it going, I'm not going to talk about Japan. And it didn't work out too well because women are still mistreated in Japan. Now, in the Arctic, they genuinely have a challenge. They're working against the snow. It's orgasms versus ice, which we see have materialized into a genuine problem. Now, if children to begin with don't get to be children, it's not weird to them that there is police at the door when they stir the tea, because they need to be adult and they need to be responsible and they can't make noise. So each and every one of our cultures has a shit ton of things. In Israel, there was a lady, older lady, that she asked for help as a homeless person. When people discovered she rents an apartment, they thought she was a scammer. And then the older people told them, no, she's just older. In the past, homeless was a person that doesn't own their own house. When they rape children over real estate consolidation in the best kibbutz and moshavs that will later be privatized, of course, people become homeless, meaning literally having to traffic children or be trafficked and organ traded. High-tech nation. Where's Heimnut? Surveillance Silicon Valley bubble. All exits to Silicon Valley. Where is Heimnut, the missing child? Okay? That's the difference between cult-like society to secure attachment-based society. Now to the next point. And here I talked about cult-like society, talked about the juncture of cultures, okay? And I talked about the effect of housing, which came out. What happens when a person never got to be their child self in a way that is safe and is not parentified child? What is parentified child? Actually, a lot of people that went through PTSD and got to be parents, their child becomes parentified. The parent is going through something, the child is naturally attuned. The child has to adult up emotionally sooner and is not so, how should I say that? And because in cult-like society, they also intervene psychically in children, particularly when there is a background of trauma, which they dedicatedly tend to generate, then a child becomes parentified because it's not safe being a child. Emotionally, a child is not safe just being a child, and they become parentified now. For the parent, it can look like, oh, the child is responsible. We can trust them with, many things. And of course, it's not about not giving sovereignty to children. Okay, when my mother had a store, a clothes store that she tried to open a business, and I was in fourth grade and fifth grade. Basically, I would go to do the bank deposits. Okay, there was no problem sending me to do the bank deposits. There were no big the bank deposits. Um, to remember the teller, Monique, and then I would go to do the bank deposits, and there was no problem to trust me with that money. That's not a parentified child. That's a child that grows into financial sovereignty. That's healthy. In fact, this is actually a sign of secure attachment society. When my mother lost the ring, one of the either engagement ring or something like that, that bank teller was the one that saw it, found it, and returned it to my mom. That's secure attachment. Okay, today, I don't know. Okay, higher ranks at the bank is not anymore that way. Shouldn't be that way, but unfortunately, in secure attachment society, there is no problem wondering that the zero usury bank will have another book. Because nobody rapes children. There's nothing to extort. And nobody rapes children because children are safe to be children. There's a culture where children are emotionally safe to be children. And when children are emotionally safe to be children, they naturally can be trusted with doing the bank deposits because a child wants to wear the shoes of their mom or their dad and learn how to do this and how to do that. It's not child labor because in a society that has good balance between work and rest, then to begin with, the topic of child labor doesn't arise because there's no slavery. Okay? Because both the child and the adult self can have a life outside of work. So if the child is passionate, let's say, about painting, and then they have something and they have a gallery and the child can learn about money and they have an auction and they sell the art of the child in an auction, then it can also be already an account on that name of a child with their own profit. It's their own money. Nobody's worried that they're gonna use the money of the child because there is secure attachment. Now, when people can be children, then they naturally emerge into adulthood. And it doesn't flap like this, ton of bricks. Because being an adult is not an impossible thing, because adulthood is not modern slavery. Now, of course, in such societies where there's sense of community and sense of individuality, it's also easier to grow children. And if the housing allows, then it's not a problem to have orgasmic birthing. Now, when that doesn't happen, we're going to have a missing child. Missing child is a missing home. Even if I take a look at myself, it wasn't safe to be a child in the society. The more I connected with my inner child, what did I need to meet that child need? I have a mother, she's alive. I tried to live outside, didn't work. That child needed to be met. And all the psychic attacks and the attacks and everything were pissed off that I protect my child, my inner child, and meet those needs. And instead of trying to rape that child, they would need to reconnect with their inner child. Because they were trying to bring me to the child state to traffic me. What happened? Trafficking people are raped. They do that by raping, and then they deprive the inner child. And they have to provide that child with something that child will develop trauma bond. But that child said no, wants secure attachment. And by that saying no to trafficking. Because if that child gets to be a child, and that child, but the moon is also drawing in, what is drawing in? A house. And all the teachers that are relevant to the type of housing that is good for that child. Society has to accommodate. In cult-like society, that is the impossible, because all this spiritual abuse is done so that people would live in inhumane slavery conditions inside their own bodies. In secure attachment society, a child gets to be a child and the moon draws in. Okay, if I look at the environment and I begin, a lot of children, what do? They build a tent inside inside their own room. I did it when I was a child. I began to envision, I liked log wood houses. So my mama would say, but that gets moldy. So I began to also envision what the house that I will have. And I learned praxis. Does it work in praxis? This is normal teaching of the children. By the way, years after, I saw a picture of my father, and now he has a child, his daughter. But when I saw a picture of my father, he was taking a look at building a log house with his son. Not even conceiving that the son could also be a daughter that has the dream to build those log, log wood uh, homes. You see how connected we are with our parents. And my mama, she dreamed about having a farm. Not for food so much. A house with land, some animals. Where in United States, like everybody dreams, there's everything is big and spacious. It's not agoraphobic, not claustrophobic, not traumatic. Okay? In secure attachment society, that's a non-issue. The child is being a child. What do children naturally do? Build themselves a home. That's the moon. It assembles. It assembles the condition. Now, the child does something. It's kind of. Will that work? Then they have adults, and this is also where the child can connect with their parents. They can say, "Yeah, woods of log is nice, but they need to be dry, and they need to be insulated." And a child learns another thing, and he can learn how to do a house that sustains. And usually there will be some arguments, but a child wants it that way. The child picks that material. I think it was, Slovenia or Slovakia, one of them. Child was trying ecosystemic building. His father was arguing with him about the building material. Who is right? We don't know. Sometimes the father, sometimes the child. Well, they can renovate later. In secure attachment society, it's not an issue. It's a natural thing. And people draw basically with the energy, whether it's of their food, of their housing, of their upbringing, naturally. We have natural wealth. Our moon, each and every person has a moon. Okay? We're born, the moon is in the sky. Now, let's say we're born with a more challenging position of the moon. We can use the ruler of the fourth. Or we can use a talisman of a moon in a different position, whichever works for us. Or we can use our Mars, which is to build things. For some, even Saturn. Doesn't have to be a big mansion. Now, let's say the child has a crazy idea. They want a house that flies in the air. Okay? That's new. That rejuvenates the nervous system of the entire society. Any other children had this? No, not children, but that father was dreaming about that when he was a child. And they learned everything about spacecraft. Lo and behold, there are rare earth minerals underneath where the child lives. If they refine those as a community, they can try to build a plane that is a house, that can land natural. When there were homeless people in the United States, I was speaking on the internet to some of the people, and I did what helped me, and I tried to speak with them about their vision of a house so that we could hold that vision and manifest that. Their vision was the American dream. A clean house from wood, some chickens outside, next to a forest or a tree. The American dream. That's the American dream. Why is the American dream homeless? Because the boss harassed the mom, her child neurodivergent, not compatible with slavery. Neither is the United States. The first thing they got to after independence war was the war on abolishing slavery. Okay, why cult-like society? MK often, MK Ultra, Epstein ring, cloning projects, all those conspiracy theories, because there is no other explanation for why is the American dream homeless in America. Okay, when children get to be children, we don't have to worry so much because naturally they play with building a house for themselves, which later becomes to building a house for themselves. As children, how many of you as children remember and said, when I'll be a parent, I'll do that different? Yesterday, come back from IKEA, of course, I see a child playing outside. His parent was recycling the bottles, and the child play outside. And I take note of the fact that I'm not worried. I think about it, well, Bedouin child. I think about it, well, in Finland, they leave the children, go to the grocery store. Nobody is worried that the child will be kidnapped. Nobody is worried that what's going on with the child. The child has the space to be a child. But in Israel, my immediate tendency was to just make sure that the parent returns to the child and no C factor in between. Where was that child sitting? Next to the plants. Sitting and playing on the little plot of land that there was in the entire megalithic parking lot. Why? Because children locate where the land is. What's interesting, the piles of cement or the flowers and the bushes and the soil, that's healthy for the child. That's a healthy immune system. In Finland, even in the snow, they take the children to roll outside in the snow, to play in the kindergarten in the snow. Why? Because their immune system is exposed to nature and practices itself. So they become immune. That's how they grow immune system, Mr. Gates. Immune system, a lost art. Now, of course, in cult-like society, people cannot even envision to buy a house, and yet they need housing. And they get entangled in all those weird shits. Where a child didn't get to be a child, that would always be missing now. This is why when it would get at the person as they try to level up. Because I was going to, let's say, level up in my business with my inner child untended to. Not a good idea. Not a good idea. Or another person was thinking to buy a house, maybe to have a family with his inner child untended to, become a father, and then when someone next to them connects with their inner child, they project their anger at moms, at that child, try to rape and traffic that child, psychically attack the child, smear campaign that that child is a sex worker so that that child will be raped as a child. All of that, why? Because it wasn't safe in their society to be a child. Of course they can't be a father and have a family when they haven't been that child. Forget about crimes against humanity. Simple. Maybe that person was the parentified child and they were the stable ground. And then when that person begins to reconnect with their inner child, to go from cult-like dynamics to actually secure attachment, in their own shadow work of healing, then suddenly it shook the earth. When I first did Spirit of Matters, the interviews, I was learning aromatherapy. And aromatherapy is not massages, okay? Not all people that do aromatherapy do massages. My first teacher, she loved doing massages. I did not at all. I'm also physically incapable because people will need to stand, and there's this particular stand. It's not something I'm capable of. I have a disability. I cannot stand on my feet. Um, and also when it comes to touch, not at all compatible. But I could do essential oil blends or the salts that people smell or recommend to people essential oils. That's something I'm really connected with. Now, as I was going through that course, I was doing Spirit of Matter. And basically, I gave place to the child self to express itself. The child loves to do science. Why? Because I knew my adult self knows, hey, if I will meet people in aromatherapy, take a holistic look at all their ailments, my inner child needs to express itself outside of the room, particularly after I saw when I was a patient what happens to a psychologist to try to bring my child self. Then he became the child, but it was an onset of ritual abuse to attack his mom in the child that was me, and it was beyond horrific, and that was done so that he would traffic. Okay, it's something very weird that they play with the trafficking codes. He got a complete meltdown and threatened my life and did horrible things and participated in, with other people, psychically raping a patient. Spiritual rape is not psychosis. Okay, there was a university in the United States that looked at the many cases where women were spiritually raped. But that was something that was definitely not supposed to happen by the therapist, that later said and threatened, not in spiritual, not in psychic, his patient's life if she would talk. Saying that he can't speak. Why? Because he's in those secret societies. That the child came to heal from. Okay? That's cult-like society. If people heal in cult-like society, it's in spite of therapy. And therapy is a bait so that they can re-traffic or so that they can re-traumatize. Sovereign, secure attachment society is about meeting needs adaptively. Secure attachment society, psychologist doesn't ask a person that is healing from and tending to their child self while they are making more money by, let's say, teaching a language. Why don't you work? When they work in a job that is not modern slavery and tending to their child self. In fact, Knitting Cult Lady mentions that one of the top signs of cult-like society is that they ask for the labor of people and their time. While the labor of people will never be yielding because it's a cult. A labor can only be yielding in secure attachment society. In fact, when I began to grow my business, many of the people around me, if people around me were buying a home, when people around me were crossing the bracket from the beginner business to LLCs, everybody around me, and I'm like, okay, I need to learn from them because I need to cross that threshold. Then I was introduced to what my taxes are doing under classified projects budget, which was basically an attempt to traffic me. To dehouse me. And to make me do crimes against humanity. Whether as a public person, governor, or hidden decision maker. Which I continuously said no to, even within the occult echelons. Okay, that's the difference. If people, and here's the thing, when a person is both doing the shadow work of healing, which means they need to tend to their child self, and teaching, back then I was teaching English. Teaching English, I was making the financial equivalent to making $100 an hour. Okay, so in Israel it's 100 shekels an hour. It's like in America doing $100 an hour. And then I was asked, why am I not working? Where an entire 7-Eleven shift, I would make maybe $150. Probably not even that.